This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is the show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love. For many of us, these past few weeks have been the most challenging of our lives. We've had to adapt to new ways of living and deal with the hardships of being away from a lot of the things we hold dear. But there's another way to look at it, that we've also been given a gift. The time to look within and take stock of our lives. How do we do this and make the most of this time? We're going to discuss this with my guest, Dr. Dravon James, whose goal is to educate, inspire, and empower others to live the life of their dreams. Dravon is the founder of Everyday Peace and the author of the book, Freedom is Your Birthright. Welcome back to Dream Power Radio, Dravon.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be back, especially during these times.
Well, I must ask you, Dravon, how are you doing now?
You know, I'm doing well as to be expected, and maybe even better than that. To be honest with you, just using this time, as you said, to really hold on and hone into what my dream is, and to really lay some foundations and start making some tracks in that direction.
Are you discovering anything new about yourself as a result?
Oh my goodness. I hope everybody is, but I definitely am. You know, the interesting thing about this is that I have worked full time since I can remember. I started working when I was 13. I won't tell you how old I am now, but it's been my entire life. And I'm still working and still doing that. But the idea of things moving so much slower in the world has had a positive impact on me. Now, I work in healthcare. I've been a pharmacist for 30 years, and I work in a hospital. So that part of my life is very charged and sometimes even chaotic. And with the work that's being done there on the front lines and what have you, and it's very, very necessary work. But the world is moving a lot slower, and it's having a positive impact on me as a person, as a woman.
Indeed. So have you been involved with dealing with treatment and dealing with COVID-19 patients?
Well, as a pharmacist, I run a hospital pharmacy, so we're not in direct contact with patients so much other than being up there in a support role for the medications and the drug therapy. But there, you know, you still are in the midst and in that environment. And emotionally, it is a lot to bear. Emotionally. But I think what supports that whole healthcare industry is the service mindset. For a few hours a day, everything that you do is bigger than you. And it's great to be a part of such a mission where it's bigger than you. It's bigger than how tired you are when you had your last meal break. So the energy is charged with doing the work of the greater good. But it has been very heart-wrenching work, to say the least.
I would think so. My God, you know, I think about everybody, you know, working in the hospitals and risking their lives. Usually, you know, people are called to help because they want to help, but to actually have to go in and risk your life to do it is, you know, it's, you know, my admiration for everybody who is working on the front lines is just boundless. I don't even know how to describe it. But I do want to go back to the rest of us, those of us who are fortunate enough to have our biggest problem being stuck at home and having this time to ourselves. And, you know, I agree with you. It is a time, you know, we can slow down, a time to look within. But it's hard for somebody to do this when they're facing what certainly most people are facing these days, which is fear.
Yeah.
So how do you get beyond fear to think clearly and get to that place where you can move on?
Yeah, that's so interesting. This concept of fear, which is a very real thing, almost tangible sometimes. It's so heavy and so thick and so prevalent. But, you know, beyond this concept of getting beyond fear, with everyday peace, I believe that everything that shows up in our life and everything, the good, the bad, and in between has shown up for one reason, and that is to bow down and serve us as we consciously decide to go on and create our next level of greatness. So if fear shows up, and it has for a lot of people for very good reason, we have to use it. Right? We got to use it. We're not going to spend our time trying to suppress it and say, "Oh, I'm not fearful." We're living in uncertain times, right? And just a side note on uncertain times, all times are uncertain. Every day of our life is uncertain. Every second of our life is uncertain. It's just now we're so consciously aware of it. And that is creating this anxiety and this fear because we're used to having a routine and relying on that routine and not wanting it to be disrupted. It has been disrupted in a huge way. And so that's creating fear. And so fear is energy. It's just energy, right? So utilizing that fear and harnessing that energy and saying, yes, I am fearful. And this is what I'm going to do with that. Maybe I'm going to be able to journal. That's great. My fear doesn't usually work that way with me. When I get in that kind of state, the energy is too jumbled. I can't unpack it to journal. So I generally have to have a physical activity that I can do so I can kind of get the fear energy sort of tamed in a packaged, if you will, in a way that it can be used. So generally that means let's start cleaning. If you're a person that likes to clean, maybe it's time to do a load of laundry and just start talking to the fear. I know it sounds bizarre, but this is what I do. And what I encourage people to do is, hey, this is what I'm afraid of. And after you face it, then it's not like the thing goes away because we've been in this state for over a month now. Many people have been self-quarantined or living under curfews for a month or so. It's not that the situation goes away. It's once you face it and you speak to it, the light of awareness shines on it, and it's not as scary. Your ego feels like, hey, somebody other than the ego is in charge, right? Maybe there's a universal plan, right? That's an idea, something to think about. And you start to deal in that space, just in that space. Not saying that the times are going to change overnight. You start to deal in that space and with that energy more effectively. And that energy starts to be something that now you can use. You've repackaged it, if you will.
And wouldn't you say that you did talk about doing things like cleaning or journaling, that taking an action is also an important part of it. So you're not just sitting there letting your mind run rampant.
Yeah. Go clean that closet that you've been saying that you were going to get to and you've never gotten to. Go do that. If you have some paint around, paint those baseboards. Just get an activity that you can do. It's a great time to reach out to friends and loved ones and family members. And you'd be amazed at, even in your fearful state, how comforting you could be to somebody else. So it's an opportunity to get an activity going for yourself.
Yeah, indeed. And then if you start to reach out to somebody else, you may realize that they've got the same fears and you talk among yourselves. And
right.
I think that helps too.
And you realize too that you're a lot more braver than what you thought. When you listen to somebody, it's like, oh, okay. And you realize that you're starting to comfort them. I know that's happened to me before. I think I'm the scariest person in the room. And then I open my mouth and admit my fears. And I realize I then become an instrument to comfort somebody else. And you're saying to yourself, who knew that I would, that I had this inside of me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just so important to realize that you're not alone. Right. That's another big part of it too. Is even for those people who, aren't fortunate enough, like me, to have a husband to be hanging out with. If you have to be in your place by yourself, the loneliness can be devastating also.
Yeah. I've had an opportunity to speak with a number of people who live alone without pets. So they're just in their home by themselves. And that is a running theme that I hear is that the loneliness. And one thing that comes to mind is rethinking the way we engage with people. If you have a computer, most people do, it's a great opportunity to look and see what's online. There's some amazing meetup groups. I am a great fan of meetup groups. It's a great way to meet people and try out new activities. But there's all sorts of meetup groups that are online and have come up because of the COVID-19, just a way to engage. I've talked to someone the other day who didn't have any really family or friends to speak of, and most of her day is spent, just going about in her neighborhood, going for walks and things of that nature. And she's an elderly person who's not getting out, but is relatively savvy on a computer. So look at things of that nature to kind of keep you engaged. Of course, there is reading, which is a great engagement, right? Because where the mind goes, reading takes you on these fabulous journeys and things of that nature. I do caution against a lot of social media time, because that tends to not be as positive sometimes as what we need. But a little bit every now and again throughout your day isn't going to hurt either.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, the other thing is that there are people who have used this time to get creative. They figure out things like making homemade masks. A lot of people have taken
I've
that
seen
up.
those. Yeah.
Starting new writing projects. I'm involved with some writing groups, and people are writing a lot more. A lot of people are doing that. But at the same time, there are all those people who can just easily rattle off how many shows they've binge watched in the past couple of weeks. They feel stuck. So what does it take to get off the couch and feel motivated?
Well, it takes the same thing that it took before COVID-19, right? That is a determination to, in this moment right now, embrace your best life. In this moment, right now, not 2 minutes from now, right now, the best for yourself. And I will say that there are some people who really did need a break. They were just running their lives on overdrive, and they've been in that position 5 years, 10 years or more. And they really just needed a break, just to lie there, to sit there. And for those of you who are in that position, do that. Give this body, the mind, and just an opportunity to rest and refuel. There are other people who know, however, that they're sitting there in front of that television, binge watching the third series or whatever, and their body, everything in them is clamoring for something more. Listen and obey that. Take the first discipline step and turn the device off. That's it. You don't have to have a plan for what you're going to do after you turn it off. Turn it off. And just sit and just be in that moment and listen to you from the inside out. You are the most interesting person that you know, believe it or not. And at first, your whole being will reject that. If that's not what you're into, it will reject that. It'll want you to go try to engage in, another show, or, this is stupid. I'm not worth it. You're definitely worth it. You're definitely worth it. Once you do have that discipline of turning the show off, and then disciplining yourself to say, I'm going to keep it off for so many hours a day, and just sit and wait. Just sit and wait. If nothing comes to your mind immediately, be okay. Become comfortable again in the presence of the one person you'll always be with, you. And listen to what you like, absent of what the television or the movie industry tells you that you like. Be conscious, become aware, listen to what it is that you need in this moment. Maybe there's a new recipe. Maybe there's a new diet that you need to embark on. Today's the day to make that first recipe or find out about that. Anything. Today's the day you need to reach out. Like I mentioned, decluttering is a major thing for a lot of us as Americans, that we could all probably use a little decluttering in our space, right? Just listen, and your soul will direct you. I promise you.
That's wonderful advice. But what happens if, let's say, you do take that time, you turn the TV off, you put a lock on the refrigerator so you're not binge eating if you're not watching, and you sit there and you don't like what you see about yourself? How do you get beyond that?
Let me just tell you, if you sit long enough, and if you're honest enough to not like what you see, you pat yourself on the back. You've just crossed over into the world of boundless opportunities and engagement with yourself, because it takes a very honest person to sit long enough. Because what happens initially is that as soon as the ego gets a glimpse of something that we don't like about ourselves. It tries to shut us down with shame or resentment or regret, and we can't go further into that path, and we can't really look at that and see it for whatever it is. And still, here's what you need to do, what I would encourage you to do. After you see that part of yourself that you don't like, verbally decide with your mouth so that your ears hear it. I love you anyway. Yeah. Because isn't that what we're all looking for? We're looking for someone to accept us at our best and at our worst, without judgment, without condemnation, without shame. If you sit and you're honest enough and disciplined enough to sit to that point where you start to see those things and you say to yourself, I love you anyway, you're doing great work. And that's what the sitting is for. That's what the silence is for. That means that this whole experience has been wonderfully, bountifully utilized by you.
Yeah, that is so true, because I find very often that so many people, they put so many activities in their lives, they make themselves busy because they don't want to face themselves. And now being forced to face themselves, maybe seeing that, maybe they don't love themselves the way that they should. And obviously the goal for all of us is to just have unconditional love. And it's hard. It's hard for a lot of people to do that.
Oh, it is extremely hard for most of us to do that. And I want to give you this technique, this process, if you will, that works really well. That again, I just love the idea that people would sit long enough and be disciplined enough to start to have that stuff revealed to them, and that you would still continue to sit, that you would not shut yourself off and just become mad at yourself and remove yourself from that situation. Instead, see yourself as a child. Even if you may have done those things at 52, 62, whatever, because you're older now, you're looking back on it. I don't care if you're a second older, you're older than what you were when the event occurred. And give yourself the same grace and forgiveness that you would a child. Be that parent for yourself. Be that loving parent for yourself without making excuses. We're not saying that we're going to condone it and say, oh my gosh, you don't even bother giving yourself excuses. Love yourself the way that the universe, we could say God loves you. That situation, whatever it is a part of the journey. It's a part of the whole you. We call that in everyday peace, wholeness, completeness, nothing missing, nothing broken, totality. Whatever that thing is or things about yourself that is making you say, oh, I don't really like myself, that's part of your wholeness. And you sit with that and you forgive yourself for all of it, just like you would if that was a child that had made those mistakes, right? You forgive yourself for it, and you say, and it's hard. I know it's hard, but you say it anyway. You say it because if you don't forgive yourself, you make it very difficult for you to forgive anybody else. You forgive yourself first, and then it's easier for you to forgive other people who've hurt you and all of those other things in our past. So forgiveness of yourself and love of yourself is paramount. And this time, you don't even have to rush the process. You're home. You just have to love yourself enough to decide, I'm worth it. I'm going to do this.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. We're going to talk more about this, but we have to take a short break here. We are speaking with Dr. Dravon James, and we'll be right back. What do Thomas Jefferson, Elias Howe, and Paul McCartney have in common? They all understood the value of dreams, and as a result, the ideas, inventions, and creations from their dreams affect us to this day. What great ideas are you leaving on your pillow at night? Sign up for a complimentary consultation at my website, thedreamcoach.net, and discover why your dreams are a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, and welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm speaking with Dr. Dravon James about life during the pandemic and how we can enrich ourselves during this time. When we last spoke, you were talking about the whole idea of forgiveness. And I want to spend a little bit of time about this because it's so important. And again, one of those things that's maybe easier said than done as well. You have some advice on how to really forgive?
Yeah, the interesting thing about forgiveness, and I think most of us know this by now, that forgiveness is never for the person that you're forgiving. They really are just a small part of the equation. Forgiveness is really for a very selfish act. It is to set ourselves free. And so I ask people all of the time, and I want to tell you this, we've probably heard this story, but it just makes me smile every time I hear it, is people say unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's like, well, how much poison do I have to drink for this person just to die, right? Well, when you're in a state of unforgiveness, drinking more of that unforgiveness is really poisoning ourselves. And none of us would want to do that, right? Unforgiveness does not solve any problems. It does not hurt anyone. It does not teach anybody any lessons. It only job is to destroy your own happiness and to stifle you in the place where the pain or the offense occurred. So forgiveness is necessary. We have to know that. We just got to accept that forgiveness is for ourselves. We're going to do this because we're going to learn to love ourselves. And then how do we do it? But first we got to say, yes, I want to do it. I want to be able to be forgiving because I want to love myself. I am deserving of love. Whatever happened to me to put me in this position was unfair. It should not have happened to me. And I want to be able to forgive the person, the event, so that I can move on. So once you want that, that's like 95% of the battle, I'll tell you. That's the most, is to say, I want that for myself. I want to be at peace. I want to be able to move on. So once you get there, being able to do that, it's not a one and done thing. People, I think we have this unrealistic expectation that I will forgive you today and I will never think of it again and it'll never hurt me again. No. I would that it was so. I wish it was that way. But forgiving is saying, I understand that everyone makes mistakes. Now, and this is me speaking, using myself as an example. I know that I make mistakes. I may not have made the mistake that you've made, but I've also made mistakes out of fear, out of anger, out of envy and jealousy. I've made mistakes, and perhaps you've made your mistakes because of the same thing. So I can see the humanness, right, in the both of us. This is a human thing. To err is to be human, right? So once I get there, I can just be there with it, knowing that you are human and I am human. Doesn't mean that I agree with what you did. Doesn't mean that I accept what you did. It just means that I understand that humans make mistakes. Even if what you did seemed quite deliberate, right? It still was a mistake. You didn't, if you would have known how great of a person I was, what my great intentions were, you wouldn't have done that. So a mistake has been made. Just making that part of your vocabulary is forgiving. In that 5 or 10 minutes, you'll feel a sense of relief. But then the ego will come back, maybe a day or two, maybe even the same day, and reconvince you that you should be angry all over again, you should be hurt all over again. And it's okay. It's part of the process. It's not a one and done. And the more that you do it, the more that you see the humanness in the other person, their human abilities and capabilities and shortcomings, the easier and the quicker you'll do it, the next time the spirit of unforgiveness creeps up in you, and you'll let it go again, and it'll wash away again. This is the process. So be easy on yourself. Be willing to forgive. Be willing to accept the importance of forgiving for your own life, for your own happiness. You deserve it. You deserve to be happy. And unforgiveness keeps you from your organic happiness. You can still have those moments where you're happy, but in your soul where you're just free. Unforgiveness bounds you and keeps you from having that experience. So just looking to see the humanness in someone else and connect on that level is the act of forgiveness.
Oh, so true, because nobody is perfect. And very often you'll look at somebody and we'll say, oh, their life is great. They have everything. And without realizing, yes, there are other things maybe you don't see.
Yeah.
And they've got the same troubles you do. Like you said, maybe not exactly the same troubles, but they've got their own issues that they have to deal with. And nobody is.
Yeah.
When you have that understanding, it helps unite us also.
Yeah, and they have fear too. We always believe that we are the most fearful person, we're the most fearful person in the room. And the people who we believe are the most brave, they have the same fear, not maybe that fear of the same thing, but they have fear, the same intensity of fear that you do. And so when we are acting out of our fear, we will do some things that will just make us say, now, what was I thinking? But it's fear. It's fear that creeps into our conversations, into the tone that we use when we talk, into the actions that we have, all because we believe somewhere, wrongly so, that we're not safe. There's a lack of everything, and that we're going to be the last, and we're going to be in lack.
Which is not the way it is at all.
No, there's more than enough.
Yeah, and it just brings up, the point that often we are our own worst enemies, and we'll stop ourselves in our tracks for whatever reason, which is usually never in our best interest. And a lot of times it's the stories we tell ourselves. And one of the most damaging, at least one of the most damaging, I believe, is the story where we tell ourselves, I don't deserve it, whatever that it is. So talk to me how to get rid of this kind of negative self-talk.
Oh, and our words are so powerful. Our words, the tongue is said to be the most powerful of all tools because it has the power to kill, right? Kill your dreams, kill the dreams of someone else, right? And it has the power to resurrect, right? It can then bring you right out of that. So we want to use our words always to build and not to destroy. In this sense of, I am not good enough. There's an exercise I used to do years ago, and I would write down, what would the qualities of the person who is good enough? What would their qualities be? And I'd list them all out. And then I would go through that, and honestly, I would say to myself, have I never displayed this? You could never say never. It's like, oh, well, I have, but it's been so many years ago. Didn't ask you how often the person had to display that quality, but have you ever displayed it? And then you realize that you are the person. That exercise reveals that you are the person who is worthy of this. You are worthy of your good. You are entitled. We hate that word entitled. Like we think of our teenagers when we say, oh, sense of entitlement. But we are entitled to a life of joy and peace. Yes, there will be sacrifice. Yes, there will be challenges and trials and tribulations. And yes, each one of us have dealt with them with a modicum of success. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here coexisting in this world with other imperfect people. Right? That means that we have got some really great skills, social skills, to be able to coexist in this imperfect world with our imperfect self and other imperfect people. You are worthy of your good. Start saying that to yourself. What your mouth says and your ears hear, they believe most. They'll believe your mind and your body believes your voice more than it would believe anybody else's voice. So start writing down affirmations. Start saying them. I am enough in this moment right now. I know enough in this moment right now. Right? I am powerful enough. You may not know everything you need to know, but you know enough to use the affirmation. And eventually the next thing comes. It's like, oh yeah, look at that. Something showed up and I know what to do with that. And the next thing showed up. Remember, you don't have to know the complete story. You just have to have enough information right now to speak positively about yourself and your situation. Positively. And we all have that. We have the memory of our past. And I'm not a big proponent of spending a lot of time in the past, but I will say this about the past. The past is our best proof positive evidence that we are meant to survive and thrive. Because we're victors over our past. We survived it. We're standing in the present moment. So we can say, I know that I am worthy. I know that I am enough. I've made it to today. With all of the help, I utilized it and I made it to today. And in this moment, I am enough. I strongly believe in affirmations and words, speaking those things that you want to feel, those things that you want to materialize in your life. They have to first materialize inside of you before they'll show up in your external world.
And this is the perfect time to take the time to do that.
That's what I really believe that we all have been placed in this loving timeout. Do you remember? And I wasn't raised during the era of timeout. That was not my mom's thing. But my kids kind of came along in the timeout era. And there was this phrase that you sit here and think about how you could have done that better, right? And maybe the universe is asking us to sit here for a moment and think about how we could be better to ourselves. It definitely is not in what we buy, right? What the latest fashions, where we live, where we work. That's not how we can really be better to ourselves, right? It's how we feel about ourselves. How can you begin to feel better about you? It's just a conversation. It's a conversation with you and the universe. And what better time to do that than now?
Exactly. Well, Dravon, how can people find out more about you?
But you can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.drdravon, Dravon, James.com. That's www.drdravonjames.com. And you also, right now, I'm teaching a course at the Institute of Leadership and Lifelong Learning International. And right now, during our COVID-19, they're offering courses for free. So if you're looking to learn something to occupy your time, it's all kinds of courses on there. I'm teaching a course called the 2020 Clarity course, which talks about how to see your life differently. So you can hop on there, learn more about that. And you can always check me out on all my social media outlets under Dravon James.
Wonderful. Well, Dravon, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today. We've been speaking with motivational speaker and author Dr. Dravon James. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.